All right, we'll call the meeting to order, and good evening, and welcome to the June 20th, 2024 meeting of the Minnetonka Planning Commission. The Commission generally meets on the first and third Thursdays of the month. The schedule and tentative agendas can be obtained by calling the Planning Department or by checking the city website at minnetonkamn.gov. The Commission holds public hearings on land use applications. From a specific process standpoint, that means we make recommendations to the City Council on rezonings, subdivisions, conditional use permits, and amendments to the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision regulations. We also make final decisions on site plans, signage requests, and variance requests, and expansion of permits, unless these requests are part of an application that must be heard by the City Council. In that case, the Commission makes a recommendation, and the Council makes the final decision. The city notifies property owners within at least 400 feet of the sites, posts signs on the properties, and places notices in the Lakeshore Weekly News and the Minnetonka Memo. Any aggrieved party may appeal a final Planning Commission decision to the City Council. If you wish to appeal, you must submit a written request to the city within 10 days of this meeting. From a broader standpoint, the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision regulations are the city's best efforts to codify a balance between individual rights and community responsibilities. Individual rights are easy to understand. Community responsibilities are more subtle, but the idea is that we, as members of the community, agree to limit our individual rights for the common good of the group. The Planning Department, the Planning Commission, and the City Council are charged with managing this sometimes difficult balancing act. We ask you keep this broader perspective in mind as we review tonight's applications. Again, welcome. Staff, please call roll.
Maxwell.
Here.
Minion.
Here.
Waterman.
Here.
Banks.
Here.
Hanson is absent. Henry.
Here.
Chair Sewell.
Here. There are 6 of us seated here tonight. Next is approval of the agenda, and I believe there was a change memo.
Chair Sewell, yes, there's a change memo associated with item 8B. It's just the rearrangement of a condition with regard to when we would like that condition to be fulfilled, but not a change to the actual condition itself.
Okay, great. Thank you. Recognizing the change memo, would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Motion Minion.
I'll second.
Second Maxwell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next is approval of minutes from our June 6th, 2024 meeting. Commissioners, any changes to those minutes? Doesn't look like it. All right, so then I'll take a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Motion Waterman.
I'll second.
Second Henry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next is reports from staff.
Chair and Commissioners, the City Council actually has not met for an official meeting since your last meeting, so I don't have any projects to report on. My only items are to tell you that your next 2 upcoming meetings are the Boards and Commissions Dinner, which is Wednesday, July 17th. So if you have not RSVP'd for that, please do so. If you're not able to click the link on the email that was sent by Sarissa, you can just let me know and I'll provide that to her. And then your next Planning Commission meeting isn't for a while, July 18th. We only have 1 meeting in July. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, anything to report? All right, doesn't look like it. We're cruising right along. Next on the agenda is public hearings, the consent agenda items. These are items will be passed all together in one motion, unless someone would like to pull an item and have a full discussion on it. Reading these into the record for tonight, the things on the consent agenda are item 7A, conditional use permit for an accessory dwelling unit at 3936 Brown Lane. 7B, floodplain alteration permit for a swimming pool at 15719 Minnetonka Boulevard. And 7C, setback variance for a pergola at 5765 Sanibel Drive. Commissioners, would anyone like to pull any of these items to have a full discussion on it? Doesn't look like it. Anyone in the audience like to pull any of these items to have a full discussion? All right, doesn't look like it. All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve these items?
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right, motion Banks.
I'll second.
Second Minion. Staff, please poll the commission.
I'm sorry, who seconded? Thank you.
Minion, sorry.
Maxwell.
Yes.
Minion.
Yes.
Waterman.
Yes.
Banks.
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Chair Sewell.
Yes, 7A and 7B, motion carries. 7A and 7B are to be heard by the City Council on July 8th, and 7C is a final decision, subject to appeal within 10 days in writing of this meeting. So, good luck with your applications. All right, and moving on to item 8, non-consent agenda. Before we begin consideration of the non-consent agenda items, I'd like to review the steps in the process and the public hearing procedure that will be followed for each proposal. First, the item will be announced and staff will report on the subject. The Commission will then ask questions. Next, the applicant will be invited to make a presentation or offer comments. Commissioners may ask additional questions at this time. After the applicant is finished, the public hearing will be open to give anyone present the opportunity to comment on the proposal. If you wish to speak, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. We ask you keep your comments brief and try not to repeat points already made. Once everyone has spoken, we may allow speakers to return for additional comments at larger meetings. Neighborhood spokespeople are encouraged and will be given up to 15 minutes to present. The public hearing will then be closed and no further comments will be allowed. The Commission will discuss the proposal and make a decision. The first item on tonight's non-consent agenda is item 8A, conditional use permit and final site and building plans for Les Schwab Tire at 17555 Highway 7. This is a recommendation that the City Council adopt the resolution denying the request. And Ms. Thomas, I believe this is your item.
Yes, thank you, Chair Sewell. This first project and site for your consideration this evening is located in the southeast quadrant of the County Road 101 Highway 7 intersection. It's roughly a combined 12-acre commercial site. There's a large multi-tenant retail building. We still refer to it as the Kmart building, though I don't think Kmart has been in that building for many, many years. And there's also a standalone fast food restaurant on the site. At last count, there were there were over 300 striped parking stalls on the property. The site is located just west of Purgatory Creek, a city-owned parcel, Purgatory Creek Trail, some multifamily housing, as you can see to the east, and then some single-family housing. The site was part of the Highway 7 and 101 Village Center study, which was done back in 2011. That was a public engagement process, kind of a visioning, projecting out development for the area into the future. The specific proposal tonight, presented, as you noted, Chair, by Les Schwab Tire Center, is to construct a tire retail and installation building directly north of that large existing commercial building, essentially located in this underutilized parking lot here. The new building would be just under 10,500 square feet in size. It would contain sales and showroom area, staff office, support spaces for the staff, some inventory warehousing space, and then 7 service bays. As you saw in your report, precast panels of various shades and textures would comprise the building exterior, those facades. The proposal does require a conditional use permit, as does any automobile use that has service bays in our community. And it also requires final approval of final site and building plans. Again, any commercial building construction requires that. In evaluating this proposal, staff focused on 2 primary questions. And the first was whether the proposal would meet the conditional use permit standards that are outlined in city code. And we find that it would not. First, in the opinion of staff, we find that it would not meet the general standard that the use be consistent with the goals, policies, and objectives of the comprehensive plan. As the Commission is aware, the 2040 comp plan is full of various goals, a variety of goals. And one of the objectives, or one of the emphasis of the plan is to manage land use transitions or the impacts between potentially conflicting uses. The comprehensive plan also specifically references that Highway 7 101 Village Center study. And that study does include, as you noted in the report, what I've considered really pragmatic development opportunities on this site. Both of those development opportunities, there were two, do include redevelopment or new development on the property, but that development occurs towards what I would say are the more intense portions of the property, so towards the county road, towards the highway, maintaining or improving connections to the natural resources to the east, to that recreational area, to the residential area. Secondly, staff finds, that the proposal doesn't meet the specific conditional use permit standard that automobile-related uses shall not be located within 100 feet of any low-density residential parcel. The code does go on to state that the city can reduce that without variance if certain conditions exist. And I would say that most of those conditions, or there's three, deal with buffering. Excuse me, I'm just going to get a drink here. Again, it's the opinion of city staff that given the concerns that we have about this first standard, the general CUP standard, that reduction not be made. We do acknowledge that there's not a residential structure within 100 feet of this property line, but the code talks about the guidance of the property, low-density residential parcel, and that is in fact what exists immediately to the east. So to conclude then, kind of a short presentation here, we don't support the Les Schwab proposal because we don't believe it meets those conditional use permit standards. The general standard of supporting the goals of the comprehensive plan and supporting the goal of that Highway 101 County Road 101 Highway 7 study, which is specifically referenced in the comprehensive plan, and we don't believe it meets the specific conditional use permit standard. Also, I would just point out that there's other development opportunities, locations on this site that would meet those standards. So as such, staff recommends denial of this request, and I would turn it back to the chair.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Any questions for staff? Yeah, Commissioner Waterman.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Thomas. I guess to just keep pulling the thread on the last comment you made about other locations on the site, had that been discussed with the applicant and concluded that those would be acceptable to the city, and the applicant just didn't want to, or is that more a question for the applicant?
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Waterman, I think that would be a good question for the applicant.
Two more. Is the stormwater management plan sufficient?
Chair and Commissioner Waterman, yes. From an engineering perspective, yes, the stormwater management plan would meet our rules. This project does fall within the Riley Purgatory Bluff Watershed District, so they would need a permit from that watershed district, and I can't speak to whether or not it would meet their rules.
Okay, and then just to clarify, I know it said that the site and building plan isn't recommended because the first standard for CUP isn't met. Is there anything else like specific that the city is averse to with the site and building plan? I think you mentioned like materials and things like that. Or is that just, let's get past this first thing?
Chair and commissioners, I think we couldn't get past that first condition about meeting the comprehensive plan, so we couldn't get beyond that. I think that if we were to move to real specifics of the site and building plan, I think that we would be looking more towards, and Ms. Wishneck could jump in, from facade materials. We'd be looking more for things that were done perhaps at the Culvers site, those types of facade materials versus the facade materials that are on the larger commercial building.
Okay, so then just one follow-up question. If the recommendation were to disagree with the city, would we also then need to provide recommendations on like site and building, or how would we weigh in on that?
Chair and Commissioners, if you are so inclined to recommend to the City Council approval of the project,
Okay.
I think that it would be helpful for you to state for the record what you would, if there are things that you would like to see improved with the plan or changed with the plan, to simply state those for the record so that the council is cognizant of that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
Thanks, Chair. So, city staff, just to be clear, it's not that it's the type of use that city's objecting to. It could have been a restaurant or it could have been any other building. It's just that the location doesn't jive with the comprehensive plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Henry, one of the conditional use permit standards for any conditionally permitted use is that it needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So yes, I would suggest to you that if this were a fast food restaurant that was proposed in this location, which requires a conditional use permit, or any other type of use that requires a conditional use permit, we would again be showing this visual that's before you, because the Highway 7 and 101 Village study, which is referenced in our comprehensive plan, did not contemplate uses in this corner. It contemplated preserving this more natural area and opening up that natural area. Does that answer the question?
Yes, so it sounds like the answer to my question is yes.
Yes, that was a lengthy answer to a short question. I apologize.
Thank you. Oh, I like elaboration on things too. Something else to elaborate on. On the right side image of this page, there's another a building that's proposed in one of the proposals, and that one looks like it's pretty close to the boundary where the trail is too. Can city staff elaborate on that one and why that was put there and not left out to create a buffer between this development and the trail itself?
I think I can jump in here, Chair, if you don't mind.
Please.
Because it was part of the planning process. I think if you remember the time frame when this was happening, we just had that clear channel sign installed right to the east of there. So I think there was some, at least acknowledgement that that's a very profitable corner, if you will, and the ability for people to turn right off the highway with a right in, right out probably was attractive. So I think an acknowledgement to what was happening at the time, but also an acknowledgement for the property owner to say, there is some definite use of that property for commercial purposes that the city recognizes. So I think that's why there was a little bit of anticipation. Now, I think when we were talking about it, it tended probably in our minds to be more food related, coffee, that sort of thing, just because of the highway traffic.
Thank you. To follow up on that, then, if city would look at this picture today, and if it would go through the same evaluation that this proposal before us today goes through, would city have similar objections to a building put in that position because it is close to the trail?
I think it's hard to hypothesize, Commissioner Henry, about anything. It depends on the size, really, of the site plan that you're proposing. It also depends on the actual placement. So is that exactly where it's placed, or is it moved to the west at all? If it's moved to the west, I think there could be some decent separation from the trail and Purgatory Creek and then the homes to the east. I mean, that's the further west we can go, the better with any potential use.
And it also looks like in the picture there's a pretty distinct green buffer between it and the trail system too.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Commissioner Henry, if I could elaborate a little bit, is that this site was developed well before stormwater management was anything that was thought about. So I think there was a recognition definitely in the plan that this was a low spot on the site and that it would be good for water treatment and to turn that water treatment then into also a benefit for this property, but also for kind of buffering to the more recreational portion of the trail. So I think there was acknowledgement that there never was stormwater management for the whole site in that plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Banks, you have a question.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question about the location of the proposed structure. How far would it be from, I noticed we state 100 feet from low-density residential. How far would it be from the zoning of residential? And then with the picture we're looking at, the proposal, can we determine how far it would be from that first residential home?
Chair and Commissioner Banks, the building itself would be, the closest residence is actually a multi-family residence. It'd be over 300 feet, the structure would be. The closest single household residential, so R1 zoning, is at this location here. So the home would be, well over, probably double that amount. But these properties are all zoned R1.
Approximately how far would it be from R1, that first home, single-family home?
I can do that measurement. My guess is it's well over 600 feet.
I'm sorry, just the property.
Oh, well, it's 65 feet from this property line, so I'm going to say a little over 65 feet from the property line here at this corner.
Any other questions for staff? I have a few. You asked the first one I was going to ask. Second is, how old is the village study?
Chair Sewell and Commissioners, the village study was performed in 2011.
Okay, so
13 years old.
Okay. And then this is an opinion question. How overparked is this property and parcel? It's a broad
Chair,
question,
yeah.
so I'm not asking
Chair-
for a specific number, but just
Chair,
like...
from a code requirement, I have not done a code study. I would say just from a drive-by visual, I would say that there's a lot of parking available, except when the Mega Pickle is active. That certainly brought a lot of new users to the site, but I would suggest to you that this northern parking area is open asphalt
Yep.
most of the time.
It was a bit of a leading question, because when I speak of, and I do often, about pockets of Minnetonka that are dramatically overparked, we could point to this, I suppose. So, and then, so if was there a proposed or suggested alternative location? Like, are we talking just, 100 feet to the west, 50 feet north? Like, how far away would it need to be to get more acceptable? Or is the answer just farther?
Chair, from the specific conditional use permit standard, it would have to be at least 40 feet further to the west.
Okay.
In conversation with the property owner, not the applicant,
Sure,
but the
yep.
property owner, I know that the property owner has some concerns, obviously, about their existing tenants and how new buildings would change visibility
Sight
for their
lines.
existing tenants.
Which I would imagine, like, you'd think, oh, just be at the corner of 101 and 7, but then you're going to be blocking the other tenants. So, thus the conundrum. Okay, great, thank you. I thought I had another one, but I think you answered those. So, Commissioners, any other questions for staff? Otherwise, you have another one, Commissioner Henry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This may be a little bit overreach or beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, too. But based on city's recommendation for this, does that imply that what exists there, it can't be developed in that location based on the comprehensive plan because it would be too close to the trail?
Chair and Commissioner Sewell, I'm not sure if I'm following your question. Staff's position, our opinion is this does not meet the comprehensive plan, the goals of the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan calls out the Highway 101. No, I say that wrong every time. The Highway 7 and County Road 101 study, which talks about greening up this area and opening up this area, rather than developing this specific area. So it is, that's our opinion. So I can't give you a measurement or an objective, move it 8 feet this way and staff's position would change.
I thought giving a definitive answer would probably be beyond the scope of this meeting, but more I'm looking for a general, what you just told me, where if the city's plan says greening it up, then a large building close to the trail is probably not in accordance with the city's and the comprehensive plan. But other applications could be taken on a case-by-case basis.
Chair and Commissioner Henry, certainly, and I think Ms. Wijnak wants to add to that.
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Henry, I think it's more than the trail, though. So it's talking about the standards from a low-density guidance area. It's not about it's next to the trail. That is part of it, sure. But there's housing to the east as well. That's very close to what the proposed use is. So I don't want to understate that was part of the staff analysis as well.
Great, so I should have meant to say it's not close, just close to the trail. It's close to a low-density use area.
Low density and then including the trail. Yes, I would say that's true.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Any other questions for staff? Otherwise, I think if the applicant would like to come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and if you have anything you'd like to add or make a presentation, we'd love to hear from you.
Good. Yeah, we do have a presentation.
Great.
Do I? So just hit the space bar and everything? Great.
That way you can turn on the microphone. You want to just take it out?
I'm watching too because I will.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Eric Rouse, Real Estate Development Manager for Les Schwab Tire Centers, 20900 Cooley Road, Bend, Oregon, 97701. We disagree with staff's recommendation for denial. In fact, we've been working with staff for over a year, invested of over $100,000 on the project, and last week is the first time we heard staff was opposed to our development. I have here with me tonight Zach Graham with Graham Engineering and Mark Rowerder with KLJ Engineering, members of our design team. They're here to dive into the details of our proposed development and how we go beyond the goals of the comp plan. But first, let me introduce you to our wonderful company. Founded in 1952, Les Schwab started his company in a shed and grew his business into what is now one of the nation's largest independent tire dealers. Les Schwab operates 542 stores in 12 states. The company employs over 8,500 people and shares half of its profits with employees through generous programs including bonuses, retirement savings, and excellent health care benefits. Les Schwab is committed to its employees at every level of the organization. Les firmly believed, and it's ingrained in our culture, that the company's success depends on the success of our people. Les Schwab is headquartered in Bend, Oregon. Our distribution is 100% out of a small Central Oregon town called Prineville. We are a grow from within company. Each year, employees are promoted throughout our ranks. In 2023, there were 478 store employee promotions. Les Schwab benefits from a proven system offering our sales and service team members a clear pathway to managing their own store. Each level in the program requires 2 years of service. Your local manager will have been with the company for a minimum of 6 years. The company was founded on the idea of creating opportunities for employees to truly become partners in the business. Les Schwab is vested in the communities that we serve. In 2023, Les Schwab stores invested $6.7 million to support local organizations. Les Schwab has a long history of supporting organizations focusing on vulnerable children, families in need, health and social services, and education. The company held 30 toy and food drives in the 2023 holiday season, collecting 134,000 toys, more than 3,000 items of clothing and shoes, and 95,000 pounds of food to distribute to neighbors in need. Our Tires for Purpose program provides tires to local nonprofits to keep them rolling in support of the community. World-class customer service is a gauge we use to measure everything we do at Les Schwab. WCCS is what sets us apart from our competition. From employees running to your car when you arrive at our store to America's best tire warranty, including free tire maintenance, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee, and free popcorn in our showrooms. The customer is always our focus. In 2023, Les Schwab was voted Most Satisfying Tire Retailer, a national award even though we operate in 12 states. We were also ranked 6th out of 300 across all industries in Forbes 2024 Best Customer Service list, and we were number 1 in automotive. Les Schwab Tires has a 70-year history of earning customers' trust. Our hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday, 8 to 5, and we're closed on Sundays. Les Schwab is your one-stop option to ensure your vehicles are equipped to safely transport you and your family wherever you need to go. Les Schwab offers more robust range of services than those available from other tire stores that only sell tires. Come in for a free pre-trip safety check before your next road trip, and we'll check all these components to make sure your vehicle is safe and road ready. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Zach Graham, who will talk about our site plan and how we do meet the comprehensive plan.
Thanks, Eric. Chair, Commissioners, really appreciate your time here tonight. My name is Zach Graham, 4350 Ravalli Street, Suite B, Bozeman, Montana. Worked with Les Schwab a long time, and I concur with Eric. It is a great company to be involved with. Just want to thank you. I'd like to thank you all for your service. It's usually a thankless one that you all have, so it shows your care for the community. And just also want to thank you for your thoughtful questions to staff, and just appreciate your honest consideration of this project and the CUP and site development plan before you tonight. I'm going to be presenting a bit more about Les Schwab and the project specifics. I'm also going to be going through some other items within the comp plan and the zoning ordinance, and why we believe this is a conditional use permit that can be supported. All right. Excuse me. First of all, I just want to touch on a higher level. Really, how does Les Schwab promote sustainability within their company as a whole? We all know that in our various areas of influence in life, this is something that we can participate in. Some tangible things that Les Schwab has done corporate-wide that may seem simple, but when you're operating 500 stores, it makes a big impact. The use of non-lead weights for tire balancing, so you don't have used lead weights ending up in other places. They use steel only, so they don't end up in the landfill. They don't end up on the side of the road, reduces leachate possibilities with stormwater and things like that. Tire recycling is incredibly important. Through a partner company, they recycle the used tires that they take off of vehicles. Tire retreading is something else that extends the life of tires. Up to 99% of the used battery material is repurposed through another partner company. Another one of the big things they do is working with their suppliers to improve brake pads. Brake pads have copper in them to improve the cooling. It's needed, but they do what they can to reduce that copper, so it reduces the grinding down in that material that ends up on our roadways. So they are committed to that, and committed to incorporating ongoing technologies into their business practices for sustainability. How does this project specifically promote sustainability? 3 ways. Solar ready project. The building will be constructed to be solar ready. Looking at proposing 2 EV charging stations, and I'll discuss a little bit more about the stormwater as well. Constructed solar ready. Les Schwab has a program where they're going back through their stores. The store managers apply for an upgrade to solar. That right now they have over 60 stores and counting that have been retrofitted. In 2024, this year, they have 21 projects under contract to upgrade stores, and they're first targeting stores where studies indicate that 100% of electrical usage will be provided through solar. And so with the new store being constructed solar ready, this helps them. It's right, a study is done and is something that can be incorporated if it's one of the top qualifiers as they kind of work down that list through their company. I will point out, as part of the CAP plan, and actually this image is in the comprehensive plan about gross solar potential within your city. This is a location down in the, let me see if I can figure out the mouse, southeast corner. So the light areas on this map, right in that area is where we're at, indicate the areas with the most solar potential within the city of Minnetonka. And just pointing out a little bit with this even is contradictions, potential contradictions within things that were presented by staff and other items that are within your comprehensive plan. That we think this is actually something in the comprehensive plan that supports development within this area just because of the solar. We'll go through some more. EV charging stations. Again, something within the Minnetonka CAP plan, supporting the electrification of vehicle trips. Obviously, this is a vehicle-intensive business, and so we're proposing 2 charging stations at the front of the store at this location here that you can see up in front of the store. All right, going on to stormwater. We are meeting the requirements of the Riley Purgatory Bluff Watershed District. Some of the stormwater quality improvements that we're going through, I first just want to point out, we're not increasing impervious area or total runoff from this site. So that's important. Also, they call these jellyfish, contact jellyfish. They got all kinds of funky names for the new technologies coming out. But really just this unit in and of itself, reducing the overall total suspended solid running off from not only Les Schwab's site, but we're treating almost an additional acre, or not an acre, half of an acre above and beyond, just because of the way the grades work going through this. So estimated 107 pounds of total removal a year, and phosphorus removal 56% from this area. Secondly, we're also installing a stormwater detention kind of swale area that provides additional total suspended solid removal, as well as stormwater attenuation. It's not for the whole site, but this is only 10% of the redevelopment, and we are going above and beyond what's required for that. I want to touch base on noise, something that is important and comes up with tire stores. The MPCA guide for noise mitigation or noise in Minnesota, these are the levels throughout the state that are required. Just want to point out, as a retail area, we would fall under noise area classification 2, and you can see the decibel levels there, and I'll get to that in a minute and what those decibel levels mean. But I want to show you that we actually, with operating with the doors closed, meet the classification for a residential area and noise classification area 1. This is a map of a study that was completed recently at Les Schwab store in Bend, Oregon. This is one of their top 5 busiest stores. There is a lot going on in this place. In this location, they actually operate with the doors open, and this study was completed with the doors open, which because of the rules here would not be the case. They'd have to operate with the doors closed. So the doors are on the upper kind of north side of the page, where you can see all the various, let me get my mouse going in this area here. So going up in that direction, one thing I want to point out is within 200 feet, the noise attenuation while operating with the doors open is at 64 decibels. What would be closer to operating with the doors closed is what we see behind the building at 55 decibels. This gets us again within that residential requirement. And just to give you an idea with a decibel chart, that 50 to 60 decibels, that's a normal conversation. You are able to stand outside a building while it's operating, a Les Schwab building while it's operating, and have a normal conversation with a person. We actually just toured 5 new stores in North Dakota this week, and this is the case for that. So just to point out specifically with that and that attenuation, we're over 300 feet away through to the closest building here. When we were talking with staff about noise in particular, we did note that there were other complaints around the city, in particular one to the north by residences. One thing I want to point out there is that those residents that were complaining, that was over an area of water. We know how noise doesn't necessarily, it carries over water compared to being attenuated through a wooded area here. So I would also point out that the bays, because they do need to open and close to get the cars in and out, are faced north and south on this plan and not directly to the residences behind this. Overall plan here of what we're seeing, a couple things to point out. The white area is the area of disturbance. The green area is enhanced landscaping. That includes the total area of disturbance of 1.17 acres. And I did want to clarify that because the staff report did indicate 3 acres of the project. We're at 1.17, which is less than 10% of the total area of that 12 acres of the development. One other thing I want to clarify, in coordination with the city, just because there is an existing lot line going through this building, a lot combination was submitted for in April 2024. We had to have written support from the city of Minnetonka to be able to submit that to the county for this project. Due to the county process, we recognize that this can't be recorded until second quarter of 2025. However, we have chosen to proceed with a building permit, or to proceed with this at risk, recognizing that the city won't issue a building permit or would not issue a building permit until this is finished being processed. We're good with that. But those are just some just process items and things that we've been working on with the city through this. So I want to touch now on the general CUP standards first. We went through here, item B, and I want to dig a little bit into the comp plan with you all. So item B, the use is consistent with the goals, policies, and objectives of the comprehensive plan. As stated in the staff report, this is generally subjective. I'd like to show you why I think that the comp plan actually supports this development. This was the village study. Let's start with that one and look at that. And the 2 plans that we dug into there. I'm going to also point you out to this text here because I want to talk about that a little bit and how it's not just these guidance site plans. We all know that there's more, that there's a lot that goes into a site plan. The marketing, someone identified sight lines for retail. A lot goes into play with this. So while these are admirable conceptual studies, I would also argue that you're putting, by just focusing on these really guidance studies, there's a lot more to the comp plan as well as to the village study that I would suggest we take a look at. As indicated in the village study, this is one of the larger remaining commercial sites in Minnetonka, may represent the last opportunity for larger footprint retailers to develop within the community. I think that's something that to consider overall, as this is referenced within the comprehensive plan. And while we might not be meeting necessarily the impervious requirements indicated within that 300-foot buffer of those studies, I would also argue you have conflicting comprehensive plan goals, like with the solar areas, that might conflict with a study such as that in terms of enhancing those areas and really focusing on, are you maximizing your commercially zoned properties within the city? Next, buildings, introducing green. This is actually something very tangible that we are accomplishing with this partial redevelopment of this property. And so there's more to just these guidance site plans that I think that I would ask that we would consider here. All right. So comp plan alignment. As I read through the comp plan, this is a section from your comp plan. The following review criteria are designed to provide guidance and assist in the review of development projects by the city. Item A, determine consistency of the project with the appropriate overall policies. I think there's policies that I've represented and maybe some more that I'll represent here that should also be taken into account versus a guidance site plan document that was done in a study prior to the overall comprehensive plan. Item B, utilize resource protection measures, including in the zoning and subdivision ordinances, to encourage clustering of buildings and to preserve woodland preservation areas. I would argue that, and we'll see some more details about the distances that were brought up, the clustering of buildings and higher density, what you can fit into these commercial zone properties, is a good use of plan or a good use, is good planning policy in general. High priority and significant trees, other resources. We'll get into that a little bit, but I would suggest that there's other items for consideration within the comp plan guidelines provided to the decision makers. The last item within that, just to be comprehensive in presenting to you, is to continue to use the PUD zoning technique. Maybe a great technique if this entire 12 acres were being redeveloped right now, but it's not. This is less than 10% of the overall 12 acres that we're proposing here. All right. So I think really in conclusion, general comp plan conformance, I would suggest that staff's position does not take into account the full nature of the comp plan, nor what is ultimately spelled out in the zoning ordinance with reasonable allowances. And I'm going to dig into that as well. I appreciate your time. Minimum consideration, the sustainability improvements in conformance with both the CAP and the 2040 comp plan. This is improving the sustainability of the site. This area is currently paved. It's unattenuated stormwater. It is being used for outdoor or different outdoor uses as well. The development and redevelopment of existing commercial areas deemed to be appropriate locations. Again, this is one of those areas identified as an appropriate location. Are you making the best use of it? We think this is a great use for it. And solar access protection as well that we discussed. I would ask that you consider that in the overall conformance to the general comp plan, or to the comp plan. I think you can check all those boxes. All right, let's jump into the specific CUP standards. So as discussed earlier, we're talking about the 100-foot distance and then the 3 items that would allow within the CUP standards to reduce the separation requirements. I want to give just a bit of background. In the 2018 land use, that adjacent property immediately to the east was open space. It was then converted to low-density residential in the 2040 land use plan. Let's jump into the specific plan here. So this red dashed line around the building is a 100-foot offset from the building itself. We have the black line here is the property line. In this location, this red area that is hatched, I'm just pointing out that's the area where we're less than 100 feet from the boundary line. So we're about 66 feet from the property. We're 320 feet to the nearest residence here. From the building to this nearest R1 residence is actually 97.4 feet. We're asking for 2.6 feet, and we're over 610 feet away from that nearest building. I would also point out that all of this area in the cyan is in floodplain. It's encumbered by wetlands, and though this was the land use was changed from open space, you would have to overcome floodplain issues, wetland issues, relocation of a pedestrian path, as well as obvious access issues for that. So it's not going to be redeveloped wetlands, and we are well over 100 feet from this adjacent, or the nearest property that will be residential there. All right. So we are requesting a reduction of that 100 feet. And I do believe that, and want to agree with staff, and with that we are meeting the buffering, the landscaping, the parking lot. In this case, you can see this is a great picture of what is out there and what buffers this location from adjacent residential uses. Parking lots are located in this location, or away from the residences. By virtue of what we're doing, we're locating the parking lot away from the residential uses. And also, again, I just want to point out, so this wall face on the right here, that is the back of the building that would face the residences. The bays face north and south away from them. This roll-up door here, that's what is used about once a week for loading and unloading new and used tires there during business hours. Excuse me. And by virtue of the nature of the direction that this is facing, the traffic is coming from the front, by employees, is brought into the service bays, brought back around the front and parked in the parking lot for customers to go on from there. The last one, lighting plans, which are unobtrusive to surrounding residential uses. Our lighting plan is only to light the site and specifically around, as required around the building, just for security reasons, with 14-foot lighting that have cutoff shields that won't spill outside of the boundary. And what we're improving is an existing non-conforming tall light pole. And there's actually a second one that I learned that's just to the left of this outside of the picture that would be removed as a part of this project. So we'd be improving the lighting in that situation. So I think this is something that can be supported in terms of the reduction of those separation requirements. Just to be complete, there's other CUP standards. I just want to go through those really quick. No vehicles which are unlicensed and inoperable shall be stored on premises except in appropriately designed and screened storage areas. Les Schwab only provides same-day service to operable vehicles which must be licensed in order to be driven to the site. All repair, assembly, disassembly, and maintenance of vehicles shall occur within the closed buildings except minor maintenance, including tire inflation, adding oil, and wiper replacement. At their retail locations, Les Schwab only provides service indoors. Number 3, no public address system shall be audible from any residential parcel. At their retail locations, which this is, Les Schwab does not use a public address system. Stacking for gas pumps, I won't read all of number 4. There's no gas pumps, that's not applicable. Number 5, no sales, storage, or display of used automobiles except when a conditional use permit is approved allowing automobile, truck, trailer, or boat sales or rentals. That's not their business, that's not what they do, not applicable. All canopy lighting shall be recessed lighting, flush mounted with canopy ceiling and having a flat glass lens. Again, not applicable, no canopies, all the work's done indoors. I obviously skipped number 6. That's the first one that I went through. That was the specific one addressed by staff. And then number 8, canopies shall be set back at least 20 feet from all property lines, but in no case shall the setbacks be less than 30 feet. Again, no canopies. This is not applicable. Les Schwab's a great company. They commit to their community. I think you guys have an opportunity here before you tonight to bring them in. I think we've shown why subjectively there's a lot of arguments why this project does comply with the general requirements of the comprehensive plan. What we're asking for in terms of the specific requirements to that R1 property that has an existing residence on it is a 2.6 foot reduction, and that residence is over 600 feet away. On the other adjacent property that again I explained, the land use and the change that happened to that it can't be really redeveloped without some major changes that would come before you. We're asking for 66 feet, but again, we're over 300 feet away from those adjacent uses. So that's what we're requesting here tonight. Final thought, this conditional use permit application is a reasonable request. That is in alignment with Cindy's comp plan, as well as specific review requirements for the use within the zoning district. We really appreciate your serious consideration of this and are available for any questions that you might have for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? Yeah, Commissioner Waterman.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Zach and Eric, for the detailed presentation. 2 questions. I asked this one of staff. Could you put it elsewhere on the property? It sounds like sight lines might be an issue, but can you comment what else you evaluated on?
Yeah, sight lines is the immediate thought. Honestly, it wasn't even suggested to us by staff. This was the area that the owner of the property has marketed to Les Schwab. it wasn't suggested until a week and a half ago when we found out that this wouldn't be supported by staff. So we haven't even had time to evaluate anywhere else on the property. Again, we've put $100,000 into this location because one, that's where the owner wants it. That's where the owner's marketing. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. And the second question is actually leading from the first. So it sounds like this past week was the first you heard about the rejection when they come out with the public response. Like, so, I mean, at any point was there discussion like, hey, I mean, by the way, there's this comprehensive plan. There's a very specific plan for this site, and this might not fit in it. I'm surprised that it's kind of news that the city isn't in favor of it.
I'm surprised too. Yeah. And we had a pre-application in February of 2023. I might even ask Mark. He's had a lot more of the direct correspondence with staff, but no, this came as a surprise to us when we received the stat, when we came to understand this. That
like the comprehensive plan is like this might just not fit with that. There's like guidance for this area, and this just might not fit in.
Yeah, we did not receive that guidance. I mean, that's honestly, if in February 2023, when we're asking those questions, we really try to vet this stuff out ahead of time before we jump into those things. Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
Thank you. Have you had any communications or meetings with neighbors around to get their feedback?
No, we have not.
Okay. And this could be putting the cart before the horse, but you mentioned about the sound study, and a lot of people in the industry are going away from air-powered tools because I think the noisiest thing in a tire change center would be air-powered impact driver to put the lug nuts back on the wheels too. So are you thinking about using electric-powered tools to minimize the noise with the doors open?
I am not an operations guy, so I don't know if they're thinking about it. I know that right now for new stores they continue to install the air-powered ones. So I don't know if they've even talked about it, to be honest. Eric, I don't.
No. Yes.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Another thing tactically here, and we have to get the strategic before the tactical, but since you're here, I'd like to ask the question anyway. You mentioned in your proposal that the solar panels could account for 100% of all the electricity that's used on site.
Maybe to clarify, Les Schwab's goal, so the managers apply for the solar upgrade program on their existing stores, and then as they apply for it and those studies are done, the ones that get done first in their stores are the ones that can provide up to 100%. Like they want to get the most bang for their buck and then kind of work their way down in terms of going solar company wide. So when I say this is constructed solar ready and we're not just going to put solar panels in, it's because Les Schwab corporate as a whole, looking at all of their stores in the 12 different states they operate, they're going to go, so a store manager applies and they may get 100 applications in a year, and like this year they have 21 under contract. They're going to take the 21 that have the best bang for the buck. They're going to get the most, the closest to 100% of their total electrical usage out of the solar installation on those roofs. Does that make sense? So it's an application program that comes from the store managers, and so we're not necessarily just committing. We can't just commit to solar because they're looking at this as a comprehensive, like sustainability program with the overall company.
So you're saying that Les Schwab, they look at the proposal only after the manager of the store requests it?
That's correct. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
And you may not be able to answer this either, but how long would it be between store being built to when manager requests to when on average these get approved or denied?
That's a great question, because part of the program is going back to stores that might be 50 years old, and because they have over 500 stores in the company, and so right now they have 60, so they're just over 10%. They're getting another 21 this year, and so it could happen. I mean, the manager could start requesting right away, and it could be a year because hey, this is like a premium site for solar, or it could be 5 years because it's a little bit further down. So that's probably the best answer that I could give you at this point. Yeah.
Let me ask you another question about that too. You said that you've been in talks with the city since February of 2023,
That's what, yeah.
and Les Schwab gave a very detailed proposal. So I'm assuming that in all the research that you do, I would assume that you've done a sun study to see the solar potential of this specific site.
We have not. No, that happens at, and again, that just because the way Les Schwab operates as a whole, those studies happen as those proposals come in from the store manager to determine which ones to do solar with. The work that we did is just what I showed was that exhibit from the city's comp plan, and which identifies this area as a high potential area for solar, which makes sense, right? Because it's in a commercial area that's going to have more rooftop, fewer trees, and that's why it's a high potential area for solar. Yep.
The reason I asked that question is because several times in your presentation you touted that solar is a big benefit to, if we do approve this site, that it would improve the site.
Yeah, and I think one of the points I want to clarify there is in any comp plan there's potentially conflicting goals, right? And so part of that conflict is, hey, there's very few locations left within Minnetonka that are identified in the comp plan for ongoing commercial and in particular larger box commercial development. That conflicts with the idea of, hey, we want this to be a bigger transition. We want to reduce the area of this property, of this 12 acres, and make it a better transition, and reduce that total developable area. So that conflicts. I'm also pointing out that also conflicts with the solar potential of this area. You increase that buffer zone, you add the trees, you reduce the rooftops, you're reducing the solar potential. I think the thing that I'm trying to point out is this is a very that first, is this in conformance within the comp plan? It is a very subjective thing. And to point out one guidance, I would suggest pointing out a guidance site plan and saying that's it, it's not in conformance. There's other things within the comp plan that I would say, okay, consider these things. And also consider, hey, these things might be in conflict. The city has to balance those things out, and that's the hard part. I get it. That's I've got my opinions. You guys have the hard job here, but I would ask you to consider those things in addition, and weighing those versus what is a conceptual site plan, and ultimately the markets drives this, right? This is and I would argue the comp plan, that a study happened, a comp plan happened that references that study, sure, but I even took you through some of that text in that study showing, hey, we're meeting that. We may not be meeting those site plan specifics, but then we look at the zoning ordinance. What's the allowance for a CUP approval? We're meeting those allowances to reduce that 100 feet, and that's what we're requesting ultimately. So I'm trying to say, hey, I think there's a bigger umbrella to look at here.
Thank you. One more tactical question about the lights of the cars themselves. So you mentioned the lighting on the building, that's keeping down to a minimum. When cars are coming you said they probably come into the north, they exit via the south, and then technicians, they drive it back up to the north again too. It is far away, a little bit further than 100 feet, but are you making any thoughts about when the cars do turn onto the east to shield some of the car headlights from the residential area to the east?
No, that's smart. I hadn't thought of that, but we'd be certainly willing to do something to address a condition if you were interested in that. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Banks.
Yeah. Hey, Eric. Thanks for the presentation. It's really good. Very informational. But one of the things you mentioned, there was a application, and I think I missed it, application that went into the county, correct?
Oh, sorry, I went way too far. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Can you just elaborate on what was the purpose of that application?
Yeah. So let me go back to the site plan real quick here. Sure. So this line right here that goes east-west, the black line right there, that's an existing property line. So the same owner owns the parcel to the north and owns the parcel to the south. And you can see it goes through the southeast corner of the building there. So in order we can't have a parcel line going through the building. The owner agreed, hey, this is all my property. I lease it out to various tenants. We need to combine these to a single parcel so that we can lease. And you know, it's also taking care of an existing condition with Northern Tool there. So that's what that application to the county was for, is to combine that lot line.
Okay. And so I know you said you guys have been at this since 2023. How long have you known about this particular issue that needed to be resolved?
Oh, that came to everybody's attention early on. Yeah, I would say. So we did the pre-application early. They worked through all the deals. We really started digging in last fall, and it was almost a right away thing. And then how do we deal with this as we go through it? So,
Okay.
Yep.
And so you just applied to have this
In April.
in April.
Yeah, and so the way the county works is they process all of their lot combinations once a year, and the deadline was it August? The deadline was August, and then basically all of that's going to set until next year. And so we missed last August, and so we knew we had until August this year, and then we knew it wasn't going to be recorded until like Q2-ish of 2025.
And so when you did that, were you fairly comfortable or confident that the city or that our staff would be in favor of your project?
We
in
were,
April?
yeah, because it required that the city of Minnetonka actually sign off on that in terms of our submittal to the county for this. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Mannion, you have a question?
Yes, sir. You used the term solar ready. Will you talk a little bit about that? So it sounds like you're preparing the building to be ready for solar and that can be added later. What does that entail? And
Yep.
then the other thing, will you talk a little bit about your jellyfish, the maintenance involved? Where are the solids or the waste from that? How is that treated?
Yep. So starting out with solar ready, a couple things in this climate with the snow and the solar panels. The solar panels don't weigh that much, but they do tend to increase the drifting on the roof. So you have increased structure. It's just got to hold more snow load, more weight on the roof for that. Also, there's additional roof penetrations for all the wiring and everything to go through the roof. And then there's the electrical equipment associated with tying that into the building electrical system back to the grid. I'm not an electrical engineer, I'm a civil engineer, so I don't know all the details of that, but that all has to be set up so that it's ready to go. So it's essentially a plug and play system. You install the panels and plug them in, is the goal for a solar ready system. Yep. And sorry, I forgot about the other one. Jellyfish. Yeah, so this is a let me get back there. Okay. So a couple things are going on with this. One side of it, it's a really fancy concrete box that gets buried in the ground, and we collect the stormwater and we run it it runs through this. And the first thing, so as it's coming in, first thing it really does is go through really a separator where the solids, the total suspended solids, can settle out within that. And then it goes through this media over on the other side, and that's for the phosphorus removal. So the media needs to be, and the total suspended solids, there's a pumping and an exchange of the media about every 6 months. And the media, because of the nature of it, is usually, it depends on the local area. And so in this case, Les Schwab would contract with a pump truck and with an entity that maintains these, because there's more and more going on in the area, and so there's companies that maintain these for disposal of the total suspended solids, as well as the media for the phosphorus removal on the other side. And so there's a lot of different flowing. You want to get the total suspended solids out before it goes through the media that removes and consumes the phosphorus going through that, and then as it works its way through the box, then it discharges out into, in this case, into the Riley or the Purgatory Creek.
So where I'm going with this is, as you pull the TSSs out of this, you're gaining a large concentration of the phosphorus. You're saying that the vacuum company is actually the vac truck is going to take and dispose of that?
Of the TSS, the media, like Contech itself, the media for the phosphorus, and Mark, can you correct me on that? do they recycle those, or are they disposed and they replace the media?
I don't know what they do with the cartridges. They're cartridges like
Yeah.
you have in a water system.
Yeah.
Cleaning your water. It does the
Yeah.
same thing. It takes out the phosphorus
But those,
through filtration.
yeah, those are either disposed of or recycled completely separate from what gets pumped out with the suspended solids. Yeah.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Any other final questions for the applicants? All right. I don't think so, but we may have more for you.
Thank
Great,
you for your
thank
time.
All right.
Chair, before you
Yes.
open the hearing, I just need to correct something for the record.
Please do.
I believe the applicant indicated the noise levels that are acceptable. Just so that you know, and you might not deal with noise complaints as much as we do, the noise area classification is based on the land use of the person who hears it, not of the use. So in this case, if someone on the trail or in a home, that would be considered a NAC1, which is a maximum of 60 decibels in a L50, which is for 30 minutes, or a 65, which is an L10, which is 6 minutes of the hour. So I don't think that was clear in the
Okay.
presentation, so I wanted to make sure you understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just for the one more clarification, are the noise levels, is that with the doors closed, fully
It's
enclosed?
whatever noise level is monitored at the time of the complaint.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
All right, sounds good, thank you. All right, we will open the public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and offer any comments, please do. All right, doesn't look like we have anybody, so we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any final questions? Otherwise, are we ready to have a discussion? I'd love to hear some thoughts. Yeah, yeah.
I
Commissioner
have
Maxwell.
a question for staff about when in the process the comp plan is assessed, right? This is the second proposal in the last couple of months where the Mills Church applicant said, oh, they found out about this comp plan when the final packet came out, and this is the second one. So I'd like to hear when in the application process staff reviews compliance to the comp plan and how that works.
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Maxwell, I'll just speak to this project. I think that the Mills Church comprehensive plan thing is a kind of a separate separate beast that I don't want to reopen at this public hearing. So I want to start by saying, and as I said to the applicant 2 weeks ago, in this zoning district, an auto use with service bays is a conditionally permitted use. And so if the question is asked, is this a use appropriate? The answer is, as a conditionally permitted use, yes, you can apply for a conditionally permitted use. The city's review of this, I can't speak to what the applicant is suggesting, that they've been working with city staff since 2000 and for a year and a half on this. I know that we take questions about projects and properties all the time. I know that I had many phone conversations with questions about permitting and really specific questions about what do we allow for certain types of stormwater management systems and things like that. That's not a conversation about a project from my perspective. We have a development review meeting on a project. As you know, our development review team gets together and we talk about a project once we get that application in hand. And that it's not uncommon for something to come up when we get a large group of people together, that someone in that meeting says, hey, what about this? Nobody has thought about this. And so it was at that point that we had that conversation about the comprehensive plan, the general and subjective, as I pointed out in the report. This is a subjective standard. This is staff's opinion that this project doesn't meet that subjective standard. The applicant and staff simply have a disagreement on that. So I don't know if Ms. Wishnak, if you have more to add, but I would say that the suggestion that working with or having a conversation with an individual staff member leads to a staff recommendation a year in advance of an application that's inaccurate. That a staff recommendation comes when we get an application in, and that we have a conversation involving a full body of our staff, which is economic development, housing, legal, fire, police, engineering, public works, natural resources, planning. We all collaboratively come together and work on something. So I certainly, I guess that's the best that I can do on that.
The only thing I would add, Chair and Commissioner, I think that points of disagreement, people will pick up on things that, maybe was said in isolation, and I think sometimes that happens, especially a long period of time that the applicant is describing. It's not staff's intention to mislead people. I think sometimes the problem is you get bits and pieces of information from an applicant, and then you don't see the totality of what's being proposed until the very kind of application point. And until you see that, you can't really make a formal recommendation to the applicant, and I think that's absolutely what happened here. I don't think I would qualify that as what happened in Minnetonka Mills. And in fact, I believe that description is very inaccurate. So I'll offer that as an explanation.
So to summarize, tell me if I'm correct in my understanding, that any assessment or a formal assessment of the 2040 comp plan and how a proposal would fit that come after that formal application has been made. Is that correct?
Yeah, true. And I think that if something clearly didn't fit the comprehensive guide plan guidance of a property, that would be very clear. If someone was trying to propose a commercial use on a property that was guided residential, I mean, obviously that would be very clear and come very early in a conversation. But when the question is an evaluation of consistency with something, Chair and Commissioners, that comes through conversation amongst staff and our evaluation. And again, this is our recommendation to the Planning Commission. Really, it's for you to decide.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Otherwise, we are on the comment section. We still have another item to go over tonight. So who'd like to offer comments? Commissioner Waterman, thanks for going first.
Sure, I'm happy to go. So really appreciate the detail, like I said, in the especially around the comp plan in the presentation. I've definitely been on the fence about this one. Kind of wish, it's probably everyone wishes maybe this had been hammered out prior to getting here. So a couple points in no particular order. The city's point about kind of this having a new and impactful impact in close proximity to existing natural, recreational, resource and residential uses when other locations do exist on the larger site does carry a lot of weight for me. And overall it's tricky because in being here, I do support the comprehensive plan view on what to do with particular zones and locations, especially as we see here. There was a public engagement process several years ago that kind of came up with like, hey, here's the best use of this site, but we also have to, of course, balance that against property rights. I agree it's not useful as an empty lot. It's great that really no change in impervious surface, and we get some stormwater treatment. The objective part about the comprehensive plan, or the why it's not recommended about distance, it doesn't carry quite as much weight, but that is noted. It's just very close to the trails. Not really sure what to make of the communication. But I mean, overall, the city wants to green it up, and we need to balance that against property ownership rights. And I really, the point of the comprehensive plan about really finding those opportunities to green up spaces and have those natural transitions with areas next door really kind of carries the day for me. And I definitely understand the frustration with the process on this. But overall, I mean, this facility, this application, it needs a CUP. And if the subjective CUP isn't met, then the city really isn't obligated to approve. It could be a good site, but for that trail and the creek and the guidance, that's just what I'm stuck on. And the other thing is, I mean, you know, the staff is not just these two here, it's all the departments that Ms. Thomas listed that kind of looked at this and they said, hey, we really are not in a position to recommend it. So I'm in agreement with the staff on this one.
Great, thank you. Other commissioners?
I'm in agreement with the staff as well. They've laid out a good reasoning, so I won't go through and berate that. But something that you may not know, but we do, is we are blessed to have an excellent staff. And I'd really encourage you to get back in front with some other ideas. I'm sorry that things worked out the way for you, the way they did. But we have some wonderful creative people, and I think if you come back to them with some other ideas, they'd be able to work with you, and they would be excited to work with you. I'd also encourage you to also think about where, when you pull TSSs or TDSs out of stuff, where it goes next step, so it's not poisoning in a greater concentration in another spot. And something else that we brought up is a way to maybe communicate with the neighbors. If you open up the communication with them, it'd be really good. But I'll be following the staff's recommendation. And I do think this is a great asset for our community. You guys did an excellent job of presenting. You should be applauded. And I can see having this in our community would be a great thing. I'm very much encouraged and would really like to see you flourish here. But for tonight, I'm following the staff's recommendations. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Maxwell.
I both agree with the city and disagree with the city on this one. So for the specific standard that they cite, that the use shall not be within 100 feet of the low density parcel or adjacent to medium high density, in this case, I feel that this proposal would meet the requirements to reduce the separation requirements. So having landscaping, berming, there's a lot of vegetation in between the residential use. The parking lots are already there, so there's no change, and the lighting is unobtrusive to residential. So I think that specific standard is met by the proposal, so I disagree with staff on that one, but I do agree with staff on the more subjective general standard, that this is adding a use, to a greater impact use to the site in that neighboring area in between the residential. That being said, I struggle to see what other use we could put there. I think putting my shoes in the owner of the parcel, who could you market it to that would be possible for that use? I realize that this auto use would have a lot of traffic. Maybe there's something less traffic, but we're not going to get a farmer's market there as a CUP every summer, I don't think, long term. So that's where I struggle from the homeowner's perspective, but I agree with the city on that general standard. So I will not be supporting this project today.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Henry.
The role of the Planning Commission is to take in all the information and submit some kind of a filtered response. And there's a lot of information to take in here from some very thoughtful parties, and everybody has done their homework to the best of their ability to it. And I really applaud the applicant to what they did, because they show that there's a lot of thought in the planning of the site, as well as how they can blend in with the community. And I've been working with city staff for quite some time, and I know that the work that they do is always thoughtful and looking back to the betterment of the community. And like Chair always says in the beginning of the meetings, we have to codify a balance between individual rights and community responsibilities. And a lot of times the codification is not black and white, that you have to do some finessing of the codes or of the comprehensive plan. Different people interpret it differently. So like city staff said today, there's it's upon to us to give a recommendation. They've recommended, and what I'm saying here is it's a really difficult decision because there's a lot of things to think about. I do think that it's a parking lot now. Should it be something else besides a parking lot? There's probably a better use for it than just a parking lot. And if I were the owner of the property, would I like to have something else in there? I probably would. Is it too close to the creek? Is it too close to the trail? I believe it is. In that area, I think I think the city had a correct interpretation of it. But like Commissioner Maxwell said, what do we put in there in lieu of something else? And maybe there's a third option. Maybe we push it out a little bit. Maybe we have not a complete unimpeded parking lot into that road going onto Highway 7. Maybe we have to change the shape of the building in some way. The good news is it's a process, and I think the city staff has spoken, and we're speaking here as a commission, but I think what it needs is a little bit more digesting and a little bit more analysis to be put into it and some compromise. And I'm looking forward to that. So in general, I can't vote for the approval of this because it doesn't meet some of the standards that I helped create with the 2040 comp plan. But I do think that it is good use of the property. There is a lot of space on the property. I look forward to Les Schwab working with the city and working with the property owner to come up with a spot. I believe there is a solution in hand, and it could be on this same parcel. So please don't lose heart and trust the process, and I look forward to what comes out of it.
Great, thanks. Yeah, Commissioner Banks, you have comments?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Well, thanks, Eric and Zach, for the presentation and the information. You guys really did your homework, and it was great to see, how in depth you went into our comprehensive plan, having an understanding about the different areas of that. There's a lot of great things about what you guys do as a company and the product that you provide, the service that you provide, and would certainly love to see, a partnership with you guys doing, having a business here in the city. This one was tough for me because, you have the specific standard, which, I felt we could get around that just because of the landscaping and the burns and the parking lot. I didn't think that the lighting solution that you have, I don't think that would be intrusive to the residents, especially where they were located. The general standard, it's, and I know it's been said by all the commissioners so far, we do look for staff to, examine what works throughout the area. We want to make sure that we're consistent with, what we're putting in areas and projects that we agree with and projects that we disagree with. And as great of a project as this is, and again, the great partnership that I believe you guys would be for our city, it falls just outside the line of, what we would consider kind of our standards in that comprehensive plan. So to the commissioner's point, we'd love to see you come back with some tweaks or somehow, get around that general standard, and eventually be, a good business here in the city for our residents and even for us here. But I would have to agree with staff, and again, I think they look at these all the time. They do their homework. They understand what our goals are. And so I would have to agree with staff that on the general standard, this is probably one that's difficult to meet. So.
Great, thank you. Any other final comments from commissioners? Otherwise, I will go. One thing that I've kind of come to realize with the comp plans is just how impossibly detailed we have to get, and how everything out of context is really, really difficult to plan for. So unless you get an property owner that has incredible goodwill, I can't see a green option going in here, right? Unless they choose to just, here, you can have my land and we'll turn into green space or open space. I don't see how that's a practical solution. So I think that's actually where the comp plan, while we look at every parcel, taken out of context. It's until you're in it, you don't really understand kind of exactly what could happen there. So, and this is frustrating because it's I'm stuck with the matter of the 40 feet, right? If we can slide to the west 40 feet, which is 4 car lengths, maybe 3.5 car lengths these days, but we're close. So I think there's another solution, one that can be worked out, especially because the property owner has to realize now that whatever they're marketing, the value of that land, it's a lot less than they probably think if you can't build or do much with the land. So I think there's probably some room to find another solution here. But I also I have 0.0 faith in the solar ready. I hope the rest of the commission felt that too. It's a great idea in Phoenix, but I will definitely take bets on if it did get approved in Minnesota. I would be very skeptical. I would love to see it. I got excited too, but the more I heard, I was like, my antenna was going up. Like, that sounds like a pretty thin hope there. I didn't hear a lot of promise. I didn't hear any guarantees, that type of thing. So, but that being said, this is a commercial use, and I think while we want to green up the space as much as we can, this is an appropriate use of it. So while I respect staff and somehow agree with their assessment, that doesn't mean I'm going to vote for it. So I might be the lone dissenter here, but that's okay. So I think we're probably ready for a motion. It sounds like we're close to unanimous here, but looking for a motion for adopt the resolution that the City Council deny the request for a conditional use permit and final site and building plans for Les Schwab Tire at 17555 Highway 7. Would someone like to make that motion?
Motion.
Motion Minion.
I'll second.
Second Waterman. Staff, please poll the commission.
Maxwell,
Yes.
Minion,
Yes.
Waterman,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Henry,
Yes.
Chair Sewell.
No. Motion carries, and this is to be a recommendation to be heard by the City Council on July 8th. So good luck with your project. Moving on to item 8B, preliminary plat with floodplain alteration permit for 1 Acre Oaks at 2511 and 2561 Plymouth Road. And this is a recommendation the City Council approve the request. Ms. Thomas, this is yours again.
Chair Sewell, commissioners, yes, me again. Most commissioners are familiar with the subject properties, but by way of background or a literal refresher, these 2 lots are located on the east side of Plymouth Road, and in combination, they're about 10 acres in size. The combined site does include many natural resources, including a floodplain area on the north side, some significant topography, a portion of which is defined as a steep slope by city code definition, and then an oak woodland brushland woodland preservation area. And in that preservation area and outside that preservation area, about 1,000 trees on the 2 sites. What's before you this evening is the third of 3 formal applications. We also had a couple of concept plans for these sites over the last, I would say, year and a half or so. The first proposal that you saw back in December of 2023 included these 2 sites and then 2 adjacent sites immediately to the north. That proposal was for a 13-lot subdivision. It did include many variances, and staff and the Planning Commission recommended denial of that plat, really due to all of those variances. The applicant decided to pause that proposal and make some changes, and so that December project was not heard by the council. Then in February of 2024, a revised plat application came back to the Planning Commission. That plat included 14 lots. That plan was consistent with an adopted roadway plan, but it did require a tree removal variance. And so staff and the Planning Commission recommended denial of that application. Really, we thought that the primary purpose of that variance was to achieve or maximize the number of lots that could be developed. The council did agree with that recommendation and denied that particular plan. And so now we're on to the third proposal, which is on the far right-hand side. It includes now just 2 lots. Those lots immediately adjacent to the north are now excluded from the plan. As proposed, those 2 properties would be divided into a total of 8 lots, accessed off of a new cul-de-sac from Plymouth Road. Each of the lots would be 1 acre in size at least, some significantly larger than that. To accommodate the installation of public infrastructure, so that includes the roadway, public water and sewer, stormwater management facilities, new driveways, obviously not public, the new driveways, the new home pads, there would be significant earthwork. That excavation would range from very minimal in certain areas up to 10 feet in other areas, and then conversely fill the same amount. Very minimal in some areas, up to 10 feet in other areas. The grading, it's important to note, would generally not impact the steepest area of the slope, kind of that donut hole in the middle, shown on the right-hand side. However, it would result in removal of about 70% of the woodland preservation area, 60% of the high priority trees located outside of that area, and 68% of the significant trees. When we were reviewing this proposal, we really considered as staff just 2 primary questions. And the first was whether or not development of the site is generally reasonable. And as we have throughout all of the concept plans and the proposed subdivisions, we find that it is the answer is yes. These properties are significantly larger than the properties surrounding them. We have long anticipated their development. So then the second question is whether or not the specific subdivision would meet the standards of our ordinance. And in terms of lots, we find that it would. As I previously noted, all of the lots would be 1 acre or more in size. And then in terms of their dimensions, they would meet or exceed all of our dimensional standards in terms of width, depth, and buildable area. In terms of floodplain alteration, this does require, I should have said, a floodplain alteration permit in addition to the preliminary plat. The extent of the floodplain alteration that's being proposed, I should go back to this plan, that is allowed by ordinance. Essentially, the amount of floodplain fill would be recreated on site. There's no loss of floodplain storage. Quick sidebar, because I did receive a question about floodplain. Floodplain is an area of property that is kind of a low area. It is subject to periodic flooding. Sometimes it's located adjacent to another water body. In this case, it's just a low area. There's not a wetland there. It's just a low area. The boundary of a floodplain is not arbitrary. It's based on an engineered model, and it is set at a specific elevation. It's modeled so we know where water is anticipated to go during a flooding event. And the volume of floodplain storage is regulated by the city. We don't allow floodplain volume to change on a site. We do allow the floodplain, the shape and the location of the floodplain to change. It's really an engineering function. So the engineers look at how much volume is retained on site. And as is proposed here, some floodplain area would be filled, but other areas of the floodplain would actually be made deeper, and so the floodplain volume would be maintained. And then lastly, in terms of tree loss, the Planning Commission is very aware of our tree protection ordinance. Our ordinance establishes thresholds for removal during subdivision, typically 25% of a woodland preservation area, 35% of high priority trees, and 50% of significant trees. But the ordinance goes on to state that if subdivision removes trees in excess of these numbers, the subdivision can't or must occur at a density of no more than 1 unit per acre. Putting that another way, or flipping that on its head, it's as if a subdivision has a density of 1 unit per acre or less, the tree removal thresholds basically don't apply. And that's the case here. So Lake West has chosen to present to the city a development of 1 acre lots, thereby removing the tree removal thresholds. So the tree removal proposed here is allowed under the ordinance. So to conclude then, as I did in the report, we're disappointed in the proposed subdivision. It will result in a significant visual change to this area. The tree loss percentages I noted, I should say, don't account for ash trees. If we actually include ash trees in the percent of tree loss, will be even higher on this site. We haven't seen this type of development since the adoption of the tree ordinance 16 years ago. But that said, staff acknowledges that this project does meet our ordinance standards. It meets the rules that the city has established for itself, and so we do recommend approval with the conditions that we've outlined in the resolution. And so I would return this back to the chair.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Thomas. Questions for staff? Commissioner Henry, you have a question.
Thank you. In reading the presentation, city staff outlined exactly why, or there was a reason to put in that stipulation in the tree protection ordinance where if there's a development that has a density of less than 1 house per acre, like this development proposal does, that there was a reason why the city excluded that from the tree ordinance. And just for the people following at home and in the audience, if you could elaborate on that so people are fully aware of the reasons why we have that.
Yeah, Chair, I'll start, and Ms. Wishnak can jump in, and perhaps I'll take you back 16 years. When we wrote the tree ordinance, it was very controversial when the city adopted the first tree ordinance. Particularly large lot property owners who had preserved their trees and had not developed. And they were very frustrated. They felt that they were being penalized because they had preserved their trees. And so first and foremost, I think that this was a way to allow for large lot subdivision to continue to occur without the penalty, as it were, of tree preservation. So that was one reason. The other reason was that I think there was an assumption that developers would choose to maximize the number of lots that they could achieve in development, and so therefore would choose to meet the tree ordinance. And that's not the case here, but that's what we've seen since adoption of the tree ordinance. So it's so those are the 2 points I would make.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, Ms. Thomas, I think you're right. I think the assumption when writing the ordinance 16 years ago is that indeed more lots would come of subdivision. That was the pressure at the time. It still is the pressure. How many lots can I get out of this parcel of land? And so to do the opposite of that is just highly unusual. So it's not something we see very often in the city.
Can you confirm that in the three proposals that came before us, that if I'm correct, the first proposal did not meet the tree protection ordinance and needed a variance, and the second one did meet the tree protection ordinance. Is that correct?
Chair and commissioners, no, the first proposal, we never had tree numbers such that we could evaluate whether or not it met the tree ordinance. The second in February did not meet the tree ordinance, no.
Thank you. And I think I know the answer to this one, but in the current way the tree protection ordinance is written in respect to woodland protection areas, that does not apply either if the density is less than 1 per acre. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is it time to revisit that portion of the ordinance? Not starting from scratch, but that particular portion of the tree ordinance?
Chair and
This is an opinion question.
Yeah, Chair and commissioners, I would say that this hasn't happened in the last 16 years. So, and we've only had, I would say also, we've only had one other 1 acre subdivision that's come forward in that time, and that 1 acre subdivision was just an estate subdivision that the developer chose to subdivide in 1 acres. They met the tree ordinance, so I don't see this as an issue. Obviously, it's not an issue that can be resolved to deal with this particular project.
Doesn't change it tonight.
I think that as the city moves forward to look at the zoning ordinance's entirety, perhaps it's something that can be evaluated at that time.
We always have a list, don't we, Susan?
Yeah, we always have an ongoing list of things that we're contemplating.
And I don't know the answer. Maybe it's keep it as is, but it's, I think, at least something to discuss as part of it. Again, we're kind of running out of these scenarios, but
I think that's the other thing I would say is,
Yeah,
Chair, there's not many properties of this magnitude left in the city, so.
agree.
Yep.
Also, that's probably less harm that can be done too than if there's fewer. Anyways, something I would add that on the list. But other questions by commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Minion.
Will you speak a little bit about the history of the previous plans, excuse me, and the traffic routes, and how this looks like we eliminated one of those situations going to the north? And by reducing the number of lots, I think we will reduce traffic. But will you kind of give us a memory or a history refresher on some of the issues that we saw in the past, and if this is an improvement or a reduction, or where we're at as far as the current plan?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner Minion, the first proposal utilized, there's an existing but undeveloped right-of-way between the property to the north and these lots existing. And so this proposal utilized that existing undeveloped right-of-way. And it lined up essentially with an existing roadway immediately to the west. So from an access point in this location, it was a fine access point from that perspective. The city had a lot of concerns about the amount of floodplain alteration that was occurring here in order to create buildable lots. And so in terms of access, it was fine. I would say the configuration on the property was not great. February 2024, from staff's perspective, this was actually the best access situation because it accessed an existing cul-de-sac, and this followed a plan that the city had for all of the properties on the east side of Plymouth Road. It envisioned this type of access so that we did not have small little cul-de-sacs. We like to have connected neighborhoods from just a public safety and a community type perspective. So we thought that this was the best access proposal. From the county's perspective, again, it eliminated access points onto Plymouth Road. The county is always looking to eliminate access points onto Plymouth Road. I would suggest to you from a neighborhood perspective, this was the least likable perspective because it was though it was a plan that all of the neighbors here were on notice that this cul-de-sac could be extended in the future, it was not something that they were looking forward to or would have appreciated. So this plan is something that the county has said, they've submitted a letter to the city that has said that they are accepting of this this access point. It's fine if it works. Our engineers have not said otherwise. So I would say from an access perspective, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and from a safety perspective, the same.
And then if I recall correctly, there were also some concerns by adjoining properties about runoff and water, things like that. With the changing of the topography, are we looking at any improvements on that? I think there were some concerns voiced before, and it looks like there's some significant changes in the current layout. Was any thought given to that, or were we able to see any improvements in that area?
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Minion, this proposal does meet all of our stormwater management rules. The floodplain that's being altered, I should have said not only are they maintaining floodplain storage, they're actually increasing floodplain storage here. This plan shows possible home sites. I wouldn't suggest to you that the homes will be exactly in these locations. I would further suggest they're probably not going to be exact rectangles. But just from a general perspective, the homes appear to be further away from the low point. Generally, the concern about drainage that we heard was from homes that are now off of the development itself. They were from homes that were located north of this undeveloped right-of-way. So they were just off the plat previously, and now they are even further off the plat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Commissioner Banks, you have a question?
Yeah, quick question, yes. Just curious, when a plan or proposal changes, this seems to be pretty significant from what we reviewed in February. Are the neighbors notified again when there's a change like this?
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Banks, they certainly are, particularly because the City Council acted on the February 2024 application. So that application came to an end, there was an action, and now the new proposal constitutes an entirely new application. So new notices, new website page, new everything for this new application.
Okay. And was there any feedback from the neighbors?
Chair and Commissioner Banks, we received just one letter. I believe that was in your packet.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Commissioner Henry, you have another question.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification on the pictures here. I looked at the key, and on the current proposal, we have those rectangular pieces behind from perspective of the road, the house, and it shows that is, I think it's concrete or paved, something like that. Is that, we're assuming that there could put a potential patio or pool in? Is that what they're for?
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Henry and the applicant can answer this question too. I think the intent here is to show usable space. So yes, that there could be a pool built on each of these lots. There also is a concept to show that each of these properties could have an accessory dwelling unit, a detached accessory dwelling unit. Now, obviously, if a individual homeowner wanted to do that, they would have to come before this body for the accessory dwelling unit conditional use permits. But this was intended to show usable space.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Maxwell.
Yeah, in one of the previous proposals, we talked about the design of the street, the character of the street, and the utility infrastructure maintenance there. And that was particularly, if I recall, in relation to the number and intensity of the retaining walls that were required because of the grading. And I see several retaining walls along this public street. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Maxwell, yeah, you're recalling correctly back in the December 2023, one of the reasons that staff recommended denial of that project was there were some significant retaining walls around the curvature of, and I guess some of the straightaways here, to essentially hold up the wall, or excuse me, to hold up the roadway, and those walls were very tall, and they were therefore also holding up the utilities. And there was a concern on the behalf of our Public Works Department and our engineers that if the road had to be redone, if the utilities had to be redone, if there was a failure in that wall, what happens? There are two walls, well, primarily just this wall is associated with the road. It's a much shorter wall, and staff was not concerned about this wall in this location. These other walls, I don't know if you can see my cursor, are associated with individual driveways. That would be an issue for individual property owners, and so if a property owner wanted to take on the risk of that wall, that would be their concern. But no, our Public Works Department was not concerned about the height of this wall or the integrity of the road here.
But maybe the walls before were just trying to maximize saving trees, right? Whereas now that's not a concern, right? So that could be a reason why
Correct.
retaining walls fell off. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, Commissioner Henry, you have another question.
Yeah, thanks. Two more. On page 27 of the packet, there's an agreement from the owner of 2503 Plymouth Road, where they agree for what that requires an easement across property, and then also for stormwater discharge. Can city comment about how common is that to have an agreement, and what would happen, let's say, if the owner of that property left? I'm assuming that agreement is there in perpetuity after the current owner agrees to it.
Chair and Commissioner Sewell, yes. There is a public utility within an existing public easement. Again, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, that runs in this existing undeveloped right-of-way. And the applicant's proposal includes a stormwater pipe from this stormwater area and outletting or attaching itself. That's not the correct engineering term. I apologize to the engineers and the audience, but attaching to this existing stormwater pipe. And so we're requiring that there be an actual easement document and an easement agreement recorded against this property. So then that's recorded against the property. That's there in perpetuity. And so even if the ownership changes, that's on the title of that property. So a future property owner can't suddenly say, well, I don't agree to this anymore. That's part of their, when they purchase the property, that's part of what they're purchasing.
And then from the perspective of the current and future owners, will there be any limitations to what the owner can do on top of that? Is it deep enough where, let's say, they can plant trees, or are there limitations?
Yeah, typically, Chair Sewell and Commissioner Henry, we don't allow trees to be planted on easements where there's a pipe. In the discharge area, yes, plantings would be allowed, and other small shrubbery, things like that, can be planted. The area can be used as yard space. You could put up lawn furniture, but you couldn't build a structure over that area, and you couldn't plant a tree.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, I think I know the answer to this one too, but on page 8 of the proposal, the applicant is requesting early home construction right along the Plymouth Road area. I'm assuming that, well, can you address that request, please?
Chair Sewell and Commissioner Henry, we actually had a conversation with the applicant about that today. It gets to be a little bit legally tricky because the applicant does have right now 2 legal lots of record. And so from a legal perspective, we probably do need to allow them to construct for sure one home on the southerly lot, and potentially a second home. But what we would have to have in place is a plan for how that home would connect to Plymouth Road with a driveway and would connect to Plymouth Road with public utilities in the off chance that the roadway, the new roadway, and the new public utilities were never put in. So it's like they have to give us two plans for that new home. And so that would be something that we would work out at the time that that building permit came in. It's not something that needs to be written into your agreement there, or into the resolution there.
So that would only happen in that theoretical instance
Correct.
after we recommended approval, the city council approved it, and then a building permit were issued, not
Correct.
before that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Otherwise, I think we're probably ready for the applicant. If they'd like to come forward and offer a presentation or any other comments, you can. Feel free, but you don't have to. If you give us your name and address for the record, and welcome.
Thank you. Kurt Fretham, Lake West Development, 14525 Highway 7, Minnetonka. We really didn't have a presentation planned. I could comment on some of the drivers behind, and I think it's interesting. One of the points, kind of the 2 points that were brought up, there were drivers behind kind of how this has evolved. Usually, as staff had pointed out, that density is a driver and people try to do as many lots as they can. In this case, we were in this 8-lot plan versus the previous plans, we had incorporated the property to the north, which was a part of that density calculation, but it was an expensive parcel, and so economics also come into play, which had a factor of do we really want to buy those parcels to the north to maybe get one more lot, and the numbers just didn't add up to make that work. And that's kind of and then also out of the city council meeting, this council had made a good point to the property owner oftentimes that it's the property owner that's driving the density, needing or feeling like they need to get a certain price. And so we had to have a heart-to-heart with the property owner and talk about, we're not going to get the density that you'd like to see. And so we need you to help us out so we can get a project that you all can feel good about approving. So those are factors that really played into the density that you're seeing. We feel good about what you see, and we think it's going to be a great development that we can all be proud of someday. Otherwise, we're here for questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, doesn't look like it, but we may have more. Great. Thank you. All right, we'll open the public hearing. If anyone would like to come forward and offer any comments, feel free. Now's the time. I don't think anyone was on the phone tonight, were they, Ms. Thomas?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right, then we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, we've seen this, we've talked about this. Any questions? Otherwise, let's probably just go to comments. What do we think? Who'd like to go first? Who will go first? Let me rephrase.
I'll go first.
You're going to go first?
First off, I'd like to applaud the city and the applicant for getting together and coming up with a plan that fits within the rules. Great job. As we looked over this again, it brought up all kinds of comments from the neighborhood and people in the past. I think you've done a really good job of making this all fit. I think the city has laid out a plan that supports this, and I'm happy to support it as well.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Henry.
Didn't mean to jump over you, sorry. Okay, well, just by hearing the last few words of the applicant, and I should preface, thank you for coming in a third time for the applicant, and thank you for city staff for putting together the detailed analysis. And the last few words stuck inside my gut about that, where you said that's something that you should feel good about approving. I do not feel good about approving this one. I cannot feel good about approving this one. This is this is a violation of the woodland protection agreement and then the tree ordinance. I know that it follows the letter of the law, but in my opinion, it does not follow the spirit of the law. So is it something, and the city said as much in their write-up, where the city feels obligated to approve it because it does fit all the criteria for what can be approved of in here, but will it match the character of the city? There's a caveat in here. The applicant said you should feel good about approving this, and then he mentioned slightly shorter, quieter terms someday. And maybe for me too as well. Maybe someday I'll feel good about this because it has a lower density than what was previously proposed. And someday, after 100 and some years, maybe the trees will come back to close to what they are now. But right now, I think people get my opinion here that this is not something that I'm vehemently opposed to, but I feel obligated to approve it because there's no legal basis or basis with which I can deny it. So that's my opinion. If I could abstain, I'm not sure if I can do that legally. I would, but if I have to vote for it, then I suppose I will vote for it.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Maxwell, did you want to go or do you want to go?
Sure, I'll go next. I feel very similar to you, Commissioner Henry. This, in my mind, is not the best use for this site. I think of our body as sort of the stewards of the land in Minnetonka and finding what's the best use for the public as well as for homeowners, both present and future. And this taking out 70% of the trees on the site, just bulldozing a road right through the middle of the woodland protection area, doing so much site grading and large retaining walls to fit something in that doesn't fit. With the first proposal, I did walk the property with the developer and the homeowner, and it's a gorgeous site with a lot of large oak trees. And yes, there's a lot of steep slopes, and it's a challenging property because of the water and the trees at the slopes. But that's also what makes it unique and what would make it a fun place to live in a good development if it's done properly. And in my mind, this is not done properly. There's just too much fill and excavation and moving the floodplains around, taking down all the trees. It's in my mind not a good use of this site, but again, since it fits with the zoning ordinances and all of our other ordinances, I don't feel that I have a legal recourse to deny it, but I am not in favor of this plan.
Great, thank you for sharing. Other commissioners, comments? Yeah, Commissioner Waterman.
Thanks. I'm also not entirely in favor of it from the environmental perspective. Agreeing with the fellow commissioners, I mean, all that tree loss is really frustrating, and I just don't think it's a great use of the site, all that grading that's going to happen. And I think it'll have more of a visual impact on the neighbors than many of them realize. Of course, development of the site is reasonable, and we have to allow property owners their rights. And then also just sort of one added benefit. I mean, we have struggled with this property a lot. The city and the applicant and the owners have, because of access, because of density, because of the trees and all the natural features. It is good to get to something such that this could be developed, which we know it would. I had spoken with some of the neighbors in the area, and if we also recall from the most recent proposal when there was a lot of feedback from the neighbors to the north, maybe one benefit is this is probably something that a lot of the neighbors could get behind, or at least won't blink at. There's a lot more setback than the other proposals. So perhaps that is a win for everyone. We can kind of move on. But like I said, I really wish we could have gotten there with that second proposal. If I recall, it just needed a slight modification, removal of I think one of the houses. I'm sure that changed the economics substantially. But overall, I will support this one.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Banks.
I'll make a final point. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of the three proposals we've seen with this lot, I think this is by far the simplest one. It's probably the easiest one to get behind in terms of, the single road that goes in, the number of homes decreased, but but the impact to get there is really significant and unfortunate. Yeah, I wish we could have found a way to make one of the other two proposals work in your favor and as well the city's favor and the neighbors. Yeah, I saw the one comment in the plan, and I thought that was unusual. So I wanted to just make sure it was just one comment. And so, yeah, I guess because there hasn't been an outcry from the neighbors, to Commissioner Waterman's point, maybe it's just time to get on and move on from this. But yeah, I think the tree loss is significant. The huge homes, we're in a time where we need more housing and not bigger housing, and so that's unfortunate. But to your credit, I mean, you found a way to get it done, and I do have to say, at least it's a very simple plan, and I do wish you much success with it. So.
Great, thank you. Any other final comments? Otherwise, I'll offer mine. First of all, thank you for pointing out what I see as a loophole or a big miss in our tree ordinance. It is the exact opposite of what the tree ordinance is trying to do. So, thank you, Commissioner Henry, for being an advocate, and you literally stole the words right out of my mouth. Like, yes, it upholds the letter of the law, but kind of spits in the face of the spirit of the law. So I will say yes when I vote for it, but that doesn't mean I support it. And I just think it's very short-sighted, and I felt like we were going down a route like we could find a solution, make something work where there would be compromise all around. We wouldn't need to go with the nuclear option, but you can shear a sheep many times, but skin it only once. So there we are. Who'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council approve the request for preliminary plat with floodplain alteration permit for 1 Acre Oaks at 2511 and 2561 Plymouth Road? Who'd make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion Minion.
I'll second.
Second Waterman. Staff, please poll the commission.
Maxwell,
Yes.
Minion,
Yes.
Waterman,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Henry,
Yes.
Chair Sewell.
Yes, this is a recommendation to the City Council to be heard on July 8th. Good luck with your project. Next is item number 9, adjournment. Who would like to make the motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Motion Waterman.
I'll second.
Second Henry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Good night.